to protect and to serve the emperor. It was one of the highest honors. You didn't get more respect than walking through the streets coming from a samurai family.
Rick Harrison lost everything in an instant. One of his most loyal employees was sentenced to life, and his pawn empire lay in ruins. His shop, once a symbol of success, now drowns in lawsuits and betrayals. The final stab came from his own mother, accusing him of deceiving her while she recovered from a coma. And when Chumlee received his final sentence, everything collapsed. Tune in because this is the brutal end of an empire, a legend shattered before our eyes. The Pawn Stars empire crumbles. Pawn Stars wasn't some lucky break. Rick and his father Richard built it from the ground up. Richard was as sharp as they came, a no-nonsense guy who knew the game better than anyone. When he passed in 2018, the shop lost more than its founder. It lost its backbone. Rick tried to keep things rolling, but trouble was already lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But then a buried secret surfaced, ready to tear everything apart. Running a pawn shop in Vegas was never easy. Every day was a grind, slim profits, late payments, and customers who brought in more problems than valuables. But Rick had a secret weapon: storytelling. He knew people weren't just buying objects, they were buying history, a piece of something bigger. That's what made Pawn Stars a hit: the strange, rare items, the wild backstories. It all clicked. An 8-year-old kid growing up in Utah who declared to the world that he had a great brain and had all these schemes to make money. Then came the TV deal in 2009. Nobody saw it coming, but overnight Rick, his son Corey, and their goofy sidekick Chumlee became household names. It was gold until it wasn't. Fame has a way of twisting things. Lawsuits piled up, family feuds exploded, and the behind-the-scenes chaos became impossible to ignore. By 2022, the cracks in the empire were showing, and then came the biggest blow. Rick's own mother dragged him to court, claiming he tricked her into signing away her share of the shop while she was recovering from a coma. She demanded a full accounting of $500,000 and even tried to block him from selling off assets. The family that once stood together was now tearing itself apart in public. As if that wasn't enough, the pandemic hit like a freight train. What used to bring in millions barely scraped by, with $37,000 in a year. And then there was Chumlee. On screen, he was the lovable goofball. Off screen, he was a magnet for disaster. In 2016, police raided his house and found enough substances and weapons to charge him with multiple felonies. The assault charges didn't stick, but his reputation was in the gutter. He dodged prison with a plea deal, but Pawn Stars would never be the same. And then came Corey, reckless as ever. In 2020, he rented an RV for a wild desert trip, trashed it, and then refused to pay for the damages. Lawsuits followed, more embarrassment, more fuel for the fire. Even the so-called experts weren't safe from scandal. The show's toy specialists got hit with domestic violence charges. The sports memorabilia guy busted for fraud. I did love making money. I didn't know that if you went to the swap meet and you could keep on looking for silver spoons and stuff like that, if you get those real cheap, my brother had a fake ID, he could sell them at the pawn shop. Pawn Stars wasn't just losing credibility. It was turning into a slow-motion train wreck. The show started feeling off. The once spontaneous deals now felt scripted. The negotiations seemed fake. The magic was gone, and Rick was scrambling. He tried expanding his empire with Pawn Plaza, a retail complex near the shop, but that tanked. Lawsuits followed, business deals fell apart, and the empire he spent years building started slipping through his fingers. But the biggest betrayal was still waiting. The truth behind Rick's downfall wasn't just bad luck. It was personal. Family, money, greed, it was all coming to a head. When the final curtain fell, Pawn Stars wouldn't be remembered for its rare finds or million-dollar deals. It would be remembered as the empire that crumbled from the inside out. As Rick tried to salvage what was left, the pawn shop became a battleground. Deals that used to come easy were now a struggle. Sellers walked in thinking they had treasure, only to be met with brutal reality checks. A man once arrived with what he claimed was a historic war medal, expecting a windfall. But after some expert verification, it turned out to be a cheap reproduction. The look of defeat on his face was something Rick had seen too often. Later, collectors still came in, but the energy had changed. A woman brought in an old Civil War sword, convinced it would fetch thousands. After some digging, Rick found it wasn't as rare as she thought. She walked out disappointed, a common theme these days. Another seller came in with a vintage Rolex, but it was a Frankenstein watch made up of mismatched parts. The offer was a fraction of what he expected. More bad blood, more tension. Pawn Stars had become a shadow of its former self. The once thriving shop felt like a sinking ship. The lawsuits, the betrayals, the scandals, it all took a toll. Rick had always been the dealmaker, the smooth talker, but now he was fighting just to keep his head above water. Then came the moment that shattered what little hope remained. News broke that Chumlee, once the heart of the show, was sentenced to life in prison. The plea deals, the second chances, it wasn't enough. Counterfeiters had become extremely skilled in forging these coins, so it's extremely important to take your time and look carefully because the devil is in the details. His past finally caught up with him, and there was no escaping it this time. The goofy friend who once brought laughs to millions was now just another tragic story. The pawn shop was once his empire, a place where deals were made, fortunes were won or lost, and every object has story. Now it's just a shell of what it used to be, without Adam's laughter echoing through the shop and Chumlee's goofy antics keeping things light. Light, the place feels different, empty. Almost. He stands behind the counter, the same spot where he's made thousands of deals, but his mind isn't on the shop anymore. It's on Adam, his son, gone too soon, and Chumlee, locked away forever, paying a price that no amount of negotiating could ever undo. The customers still come in. They bring in their dusty heirlooms, their collector's items, their half-baked dreams of striking it rich. Rick goes through the motions, examining an old coin, a signed baseball, a piece of art that someone swears is worth a fortune. But his heart isn't in it. Every time he turns his head, he expects to see Adam leaning against the wall, arms crossed, smirking at another seller who thinks they've got the deal of a lifetime. He expects to hear Chumlee cracking a dumb joke from the other side of the room, but all he gets is silence. The shop had seen trouble before, but nothing like this. Losing money was one thing, losing family was another. Rick faces his hardest losses. The deals keep rolling in, but the thrill is gone. Some guy walks in with a so-called rare relic, convinced it's worth thousands. Rick barely has the energy to negotiate. He lowballs the guy, not because he's trying to get the best deal, but because, honestly, he just doesn't care. What's the point? Another customer, another item, another day closer to nothing. At home, it's worse. The walls feel like they're closing in. The memories of Adam flood every room, every piece of furniture. His old clothes still hang in the closet. His favorite chair still sits in the corner untouched. The house is quiet, too quiet, and the news about Chumlee plays on repeat in his mind, like a broken record. Life in prison, just like that. The guy who made everyone laugh, who found joy in the smallest things, who sometimes got on Rick's nerves but always had his back, gone forever. Rick tries to push forward. He throws himself into work, into deals, into keeping the shop running. But no matter how many collectibles he appraises, no matter how much money passes through his hands, it doesn't change the reality. The two people who made this place feel like home are gone. The world moves on, but Rick is stuck. Stuck in the pain, stuck in the loss, stuck trying to figure out what comes next when everything he knew has been ripped away. The pawn shop might still be standing, but its heart is gone. And Rick, he's just trying to hold on. It had started as just another day. Another morning, waking up to an empty house. Another ride to the shop with nothing but his thoughts keeping him company. The lights inside flickered on, illuminating the counters filled with history, artifacts from different eras and different lives. But none of them mattered anymore. One of the regulars walked in, a guy who had been coming around for years, always bringing in odd items with stories too far-fetched to be real. This time, it was an old revolver, supposedly dating back to the early 19th century. The man claimed it had been passed down in his family for generations, an heirloom with more history than most museums. Rick barely looked at it before throwing out a number way lower than what the seller expected. The guy scoffed, shook his head, and walked out. Normally, he would have cared, maybe tried to talk him into a deal. Not today. Not anymore. The silence in the shop was suffocating. The empty space where Adam used to stand, the absence of Chumlee's energy, it all felt too heavy. Customers came and went, transactions happened, but he wasn't really there. His body moved, his hands made deals, but his mind was somewhere else, stuck in a loop of grief and disbelief. He still hadn't gone through Adam's things. They sat untouched in his house, waiting for a moment that would never feel right. The thought of packing them up, of deciding what to keep and what to give away, felt impossible. Every shirt, every book, every little scrap of Adam's life was a piece of his heart. Once I read this law, I'm going. It's got to be close to that now for the city proper, there. So I started calling the city station once a week, and he wasn't ready to let go. Chumlee's sentencing had been a nightmare in itself. He had tried to help, tried to do something, anything to make it better. But the justice system doesn't work like a pawn deal. There's no haggling, no counteroffers, no way to walk away with a win. Chumlee had messed up, and now he was paying for it in the harshest way possible. Rick had built his career on knowing the value of things. He could look at a coin and tell you exactly what it was worth, break down the history of an old painting, spot a fake from a mile away. But when it came to the value of life, of the moments that really mattered, he had never felt more lost. The days blurred together, more deals, more empty conversations, more pretending like everything was fine. The world outside kept spinning, but he was frozen in place. The people who meant the most to him were gone, and no amount of money, no rare artifact, no high-stakes negotiation could bring them back. Some nights, he stayed at the shop long after closing, staring at the shelves, at the memories built into every corner of the place. He thought about walking away, about selling the whole thing and leaving it behind. But then what? Where would he go? What would he do? The pawn shop was his life, for better or worse. It was all he had left. The grief was exhausting, relentless, a weight he carried with every step. The customers didn't see it, didn't know how much pain was hiding behind his usual sharp stare. But it was there, gnawing at him, refusing to let go. Rick Harrison had spent his life making deals, finding value in the things other people overlooked. But this loss, this was a price he never could have prepared for. The shop doors opened again, another customer, another deal, another reminder that life moves forward, even when it doesn't feel like it. Feels like it shouldn't. He had spent his whole life wheeling and dealing, turning the gold and silver pawn shop into a business that once stood for real negotiations, rare finds, and serious history. He could spot a fake a mile away, sniff out a scam before the papers hit the counter. But none of that experience prepared him for what came next. The pawnshop business had turned into a circus, a reality TV sideshow where real deals took a backseat to cameras, autographs, and clueless tourists who had no idea how it all really worked. Gold and silver pawn was once about history. Now Rick wondered if any of it was real, a business buried by fame and tragedy. Back in the day, before the bright lights and rolling cameras, gold and silver pawn was about one thing: business. People walked in with real treasures, Civil War relics, rare watches, historic firearms. Every piece had a story, and every deal had weight. Rick thrived on the back and forth, the strategy of negotiation. It was never about just making a buck, it was about making a smart deal, one where both sides walked away feeling like they'd won. Then came the show Pawn Stars, launched in 2009, and overnight the shop turned into something else entirely. A place that had once been filled with collectors, history buffs, and people needing quick cash was now swarmed by tourists who wanted selfies instead of deals. The business that had taken years to build was now more of a museum, where people gawked but rarely spent a dime. The heart of the shop, the deals, the thrill of finding something rare, was buried under the weight of fame. He tried to roll with the punches. He expanded, built Pawn Plaza, and tried to lean into the hype, but it didn't take long to realize that the shop had lost its soul. Instead of real customers, he got people asking him to say his catchphrases. Instead of serious negotiations, he got folks who wanted to reenact TV scenes. Even the stuff coming through the door had changed. The market for rare and valuable items had moved online to places like eBay and private collectors groups. The true hidden gems, the once-in-a-lifetime finds, were becoming fewer and fewer. Instead, people were trying to pawn off fakes, or worse, items they thought were valuable just because they'd seen something similar on TV. Counterfeits became a bigger headache than ever. Rolexes that looked pristine but were nothing more than clever knockoffs, autographed baseballs with forged signatures, supposed historic documents that had been artificially aged. It was nonstop. The worst part? Some people weren't even trying to scam him. They just didn't know any better. They saw a similar item on an episode, assumed theirs was worth the same fortune, and refused to believe otherwise. And when Rick gave them the hard truth, they'd get angry, call him a cheat, and storm out. The TV magic had poisoned reality, turning fair deals into unrealistic expectations. But the biggest blow didn't come from the business. It came from his own inner circle. Rick had built gold and silver pawn with family. His father had been there from the beginning, and over time, his son Corey and longtime friend Chumlee became fixtures. What happened next would shake everything to its core. First, the unthinkable. Adam, Rick's lesser-known son, passed away suddenly. It was a gut punch, the kind of loss that makes you question everything. While the cameras rolled and tourists kept pouring in, Rick had to put on a brave face. But behind the scenes, he was falling apart. I got a little lost in the history in this thing. I'd love to have it, but the most I can go was $43,000. Any more will just be gambled. The business no longer felt important. The deals, the shop, the TV show, none of it could fill the void left by losing his son. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse, another bombshell dropped. Chumlee, the goofy, lovable fan favorite, found himself in the middle of a legal storm. What had started as minor troubles escalated into something much worse: charges, sentencing, the possibility of losing his freedom forever. It was a mess, a total nightmare. The headlines were everywhere, and the show's reputation took a hit. But for Rick, it wasn't about the cameras, it was personal. He had watched Chumlee grow from a clueless young kid into someone who, despite his antics, was part of the family. Now, it seemed like that family was falling apart. Through it all, the shop kept running. Customers still came in, deals were still made, but Rick felt like he was watching his own life from a distance. The pawn shop that had once been his pride and joy now felt hollow. He had built something incredible, something that had once been about passion and skill. Now it was a tourist trap, a shadow of what it used to be. Rick thought about walking away, selling the shop, leaving it all behind. Maybe starting fresh somewhere new, away from the cameras, the expectations, the chaos. But every time he considered it, something stopped him. Maybe it was his father's legacy. Maybe it was sheer stubbornness. Or maybe, deep down, he still believed there was a way to bring back what had been lost. Still, the details of his life continued to unravel, stretching beyond just business. The weight of loss was not just a temporary burden, but a permanent shift in the way he saw everything. He found himself walking the floors of the shop late at night, staring at old items that once carried meaning, wondering if he had lost something deeper than just a business, wondering if he had lost himself in the process. The sense of loss stretched beyond the shop. It had become personal. The relationships that had once made the business special had fractured under the weight of fame and personal tragedy. Rick found himself wondering if he had lost not just a business, but the very sense of purpose that had driven him for so long. The pawn shop had given him a reason to wake up every morning, but now he wasn't sure what he was waking up for anymore. Is the gold and silver pawn shop still a business, or just a ghost of its past? Let us know what you think, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more shocking stories.